Hello, welcome to the National Road Heritage Corridor's Heritage Stewards Academy. I'm Jen Burden, Director of Cultural Resources for the National Road. In this episode, Josh Sherretts, Executive Director of the Crawford County Historical Society, discusses how organizations can recruit those volunteers we all need and how to keep them coming back. Hint, a very important aspect of volunteer engagement is communication. Coffee also helps.
Hello, I'm Josh Sherretts. I'm the Executive Director of the Crawford County Historical Society in Meadville, Pennsylvania. And today I'm here to talk a little bit about volunteer recruitment and engagement for a nonprofit organization. I've been involved with the Historical Society in multiple capacities here for a little over 20 years. I've been the Executive Director full-time for about 2 years, 2.5 years at this point. And so these are some tips and tricks, as well as a bit of an overview on how to build a volunteer base, how to keep track of a volunteer base, and how to keep a volunteer base engaged. So that said, we'll jump started. All right, so the first step on this is very much, I've worked with, in my background on this end, with the nonprofit, but also consulting with other nonprofits and so forth over the years. One of the big things I hear is we need more volunteers. We need to be able to do more. We need to be able to build capacity. We need to fill in the blank. The biggest problem there is, what I would ask is why? Why am I here? Not to sound like, I think it's Sam the Eagle in the Muppets, but why am I here? And the reason I ask that is, as an organization, what place do those, why are you there at that organization? Because if you can't determine that, and I say you can't determine that, if you can't eloquently express that to a potential volunteer, or internally, how will you do so to a potential volunteer? What do you do? And not just what do you do, but why is it important? And not just why is it important to you, but why should others care? So the first step of this is, honestly, you need to perfect a bit of that 90-second elevator speech that, hi, welcome, would love to have you involved in the Historical Society, and these are the crazy amazing things we're doing, and this is why you should want to be involved in those crazy amazing things. Because if you can't outline that, you're not going to be able to excite people into getting involved. And if you can get them involved even once, you're not going to be able to get them involved and keep them involved. The biggest thing here is to remember, how is this more fulfilling than fill in the blank? How is it more fulfilling than going to lunch with a friend instead today? How's it more fulfilling than taking a weekend trip instead of staying and working with this nonprofit? So it's one of those things that you've got to be able to express the why am I here and why should you be here? Because if you can't hammer out those details right off the bat, you're very much going to find yourself in a situation where you've put a call out for volunteers, and if they come, they've come once, and then suddenly they're not available. So once we've figured out what our plan and our purpose is, we've got 2 steps after that, 2 big steps. The first one is getting them. We know what we want, and when I say we need more volunteers, we want more volunteers, backing that up real quick in the why am I here, why are the volunteers there as well? Let's step back a quick second. Why are they there? Because having volunteers for the sake of volunteer, or having a large volunteer base, is useless. Volunteers are, it's like having a pet. If you want a dog, if you want a cat, well, maybe not a cat, they're somewhat self-sustaining and just angry roommates most of the time. But if you want a dog, you have to put time into this, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. Because there will be a time drain on either yourself or whomever the volunteer coordinator or volunteer coordinating the volunteers is. And the question you have to ask is, for the people, what kind of people do we want to work with? How will they assist us? And is that more efficient use of our time than the staff we have? The answer should be yes, theoretically, but you have to think that out, because if you don't think that out up front, suddenly you have people coming in and you're trying to quickly find projects for them. They feel like they were a burden on you today. They feel like, oh, he wasn't ready for us. He didn't. And again, suddenly, was this better than what else they could have been doing today? I mean, so the question is, basically, do I feel more fulfilled than I would have been if I got my house cleaned this afternoon? And if the answer is no, then you have a bit of a problem. So jumping back up to that sort of two-step plan, getting volunteers. What do we need them for? Again, having them to have them is a useless endeavor, and it will do nothing except keep you busy trying to come up with things. Maybe it's maintenance. Maybe you're a preservation organization and you have someone who will help with preservation projects on a building or help with a cemetery cleanup, but you need those extra hands. Maybe it's you need help stuffing envelopes for fundraising mailings. Maybe it's tour guides, walking tours, cemetery tours, even a tour of a museum. But what are those needs, and what procedure do you need to put in place in advance? Again, this is before we've even looked at a volunteer. What do you need if it's to give tours? Do you have the tour manual put together? Is it finished? Are we already getting people showing up on Saturday for a training and you don't have any materials to train them with? And I know that sounds like a common sense question or a common sense thought process, but all too often I've had this conversation with people and they've gone, but I don't have any materials yet. We need to create those. Well, then don't invite them over on Saturday, because all you've done is guarantee you're going to be there on Friday night putting something together very poorly, very quickly. So then, on that getting the volunteer end of it, what do they want? Avoid at all possible, and you'll see me mention a few things in here several times because they are that important. Avoid the find a person, put it in a spot. A warm body is not a volunteer. You might have someone, let's say you're a preservation organization, and you want someone who can help work on tearing drop ceilings out of a property that you've acquired that you will have preservation work done, but maybe you have demolition work that needs done first that could be volunteer-based. Finding someone who has dust and mold allergies because you didn't check ahead of time, and then they show up and you're sitting here going, oh, well, my day's now upended because I have people and you can't find a person, put them in a position. It's what do they want to do? So having some kind of a questionnaire up front. Hi, we'd love for you to volunteer. Here are the kinds of projects that we have. Would you be interested in any of those? Maybe it's someone who's more interested in research or helping patrons or giving tours or painting or gardening or, pulling weeds around the museum. But don't assume that the person who you're asking to volunteer to pull the weeds around the museum wants to give the tours. Maybe they're more introverted. Maybe they're not. That's not their idea of a good time. So we go back to what do those people want to do? They're not going to call back. They're not going to show up again if you've made them feel uncomfortable on day one. Housekeeping item right off the bat, clearances. In the state of Pennsylvania, if they're working around children, you need criminal background check. You need child abuse clearance. If they've lived outside the state, within the last 10 years, you need an FBI fingerprint check. If they've lived inside, you can do a disclosure form that says that they haven't lived outside. So they're make sure in your jurisdiction, whatever you need is put in place. The last thing you want to have happen is someone that might be friendly, but you know nothing about, creates a problem on your watch. And I'm not saying that if it's not working with children, if they have a criminal background, again, that's not necessarily a deal breaker, but really having the conversations and doing those checks and knowing who's in your buildings, knowing who's doing your programs, and following those guidelines is a very necessary and astute thing right off the bat. With that, also having good contact information. A name and email address isn't always enough. A name and email address and phone number, possibly cell phone number or landline or both. The last thing you want to do is not collect that information up front and feel very awkward asking later, or find out it would have been nice to have when they didn't show up for a shift that you have them scheduled for, and you can't get a hold of them except by email, which they might check in a day or two. And then communication. It's getting people, they understand what you need from them. You understand what they can provide, expertise, what energy they can provide, thanking them for signing up, and that communication right up front. Hi, we will reach out to you within the next couple of weeks with what projects we have coming up, and then follow through. So that's the getting them end. Then there's the keeping them end. We'll talk a little bit about scheduling volunteers. We'll talk a little bit about organizing all of that, and then communication. And if you see me, if you see the slides, I might mention this 2, 3, 4, 6 times. Did I say communication? If someone feels like, well, I said I'd help, I hear constantly, and I hear it here sometimes even. And especially in the world of, again, odd tidbit end of things, in the world of social media and whatnot, people say quite often, well, they never got back to me. I said I'd help, and they never got back to me. Well, we're in the world of, is the person at the front desk who answers the phone the same one as the one who posts to social media, is the same one who got an email from the person, or did they walk in and they talked to a tour guide, but that tour guide then went home for the day and didn't pass the Post-it note along? So it's one of those things where everyone on your team, and paid or unpaid, should know if someone comes in and wants to volunteer, we hand their information. They either fill out a form or we write down their name, their phone number. We'll get back to them and we hand that to this person, or we put it in this basket or this mailbox, because a bad experience before they've even signed up, because no one got back to them a month or two later, is a great way to lose what could have been someone with a lot of expertise and a lot of energy. All right, let's see here. So let's jump back to step 1, and that's getting people. Again, what are your goals? We talked about volunteers for the sake of volunteers. And writing enough grants, even state grants, there's a little box there. How many active volunteers do you have? Just because that one good volunteer is better than 15 people who show up sometimes when they get back to you on occasion. So what are those volunteer goals going to be? If we have a group that's going to come, and just to throw out an example I already said, we have pull weeds around the museum. We have a historic house up here that was the home of a U.S. Supreme Court justice, and it's on 3 acres. And is it a situation where we want help taking care of the grounds? That's not a goal. We want help to adopt a garden space and keep it weeded and help mulch it in the spring and keep it weeded every 2 weeks this summer. That's a goal. Or we want people to schedule for a regular, even if that's too time committed, we want people to sign up for group volunteer work days in the grounds the second Saturday of the month. That's a goal. What are we hoping to get out of those people? They're not the ones who know your organization, and you are. So what are you asking them for? They might be very happy to go, yes, I can give you these many hours. But, well, you want to know what they want to help with. They do need some guidance at what you need. And so that said, that brings us to what kind of volunteers they are. There are a few levels of this. We have the 2 levels we tend to have around here are sort of event or specific occasional volunteers, or what I would call a regular volunteer. That event or specific, they might be someone who, we have a house tour here once a year. They might be someone who is one of the front door greeters at that house tour. They might then volunteer a month later for a gardening day. They might volunteer 2 or 3 months later and be a docent in a room one day for a Christmas tour. They might occasionally come in when there's a large mailing. But it's you reach out to me and let me know. I'll help you now and then. You reach out to me and let me know when you need something. Then there's your regular people. I come in on Thursdays and do research for the organization. I give tours the second Saturday of every month. I'm a retired contractor, and I'm helping them refinish the floors in this building that they acquired. Those are the people that You want to, when I did remember me mentioning communication, back to that beginning, those are the people you want to make sure you are nurturing that relationship. Think of it like a good friend. You don't go out to lunch with a good friend once every 5 years. You call or you text every once in a while. You want to make, and we'll chat about what that looks like or what that call or text is with those good friends or those regular volunteers in the future. But it's, again, back to what I mentioned before. This is not a one body, one job mindset. If you look at it as, hey, Bob wants to volunteer and I need these 7 things done, so Bob, come in on Saturday and do this. Would you hand an electrician a scalpel and ask them to do surgery? Not so much. So you don't, let's look at what skills we have before we just put people in a position. And that happens all too often. And that's how, if we're talking cultural preservation, historical organizations as one of the main subsets of crew that we work with here, that's how mistakes get made. That's how do you want to accidentally cause damage to a project, to an artifact, to a building or whatnot because you put the wrong person. It's not their fault that you didn't vet what they would be best at doing. So maybe they're somebody who would make a great researcher, but shouldn't have been volunteering to work on cleaning a painting. And now, oops, there's a hole in the painting. So there's those kind of things. Don't follow that one. Pick a person, put them in a spot mindset. So how do we find them? We know what we want them for. We know to ask them what they're willing to help with. Now, how do we find them? So the big question, again, that we need to answer is why? Why are they here? What are you providing them that they can't get elsewhere? And that plus an exciting mission and an exciting message, that elevator pitch, are going to be how you tailor social media posts, how you tailor emails, how you tailor posters, how you tailor brochures, how you tailor that talk you give at the local Kiwanis Club or the local Rotary Club when you're asking to volunteer for this project. It'll tailor the messaging in that trifold brochure that you might make and have in your lobby for when people wander in on a tour. And do you want to volunteer? Hey, fill this out and give it to Tracy over here in this office. Or leave it with your tour guide and so forth. So there has to be what are you providing that they can't get elsewhere? What are the benefits? What's in it for me? And I say that, I don't mean to say that it's a volunteer position. I don't mean to say that in a special privilege end of things in a bad way. But there has to be, they're there for a reason. And they're there because they feel strongly about a cause. And hopefully it's your cause. But there has to be a benefit to having them there for you, and there has to be a benefit there to make it work for everybody, for them as well. So there are 2 kinds of benefits there. Both hard benefits, which we'll chat about in a second, and soft benefits. You need to prove that you're worth having them. And one of the easiest benefits, and this is a soft benefit, is showing that you appreciate them. Because they're not just there because they like history. They're there because they like history. And the people there are really nice when I come in and help. Grab a photo. Thank them on social media if they're willing. That's one of those things you ask first. Or if you have a long-time volunteer, a 10-year, 5-year, 20-year, maybe ask, if there's in your local newspaper, if there's a spot to feature community individuals, throw their name out there as an option. Just what is the showing that you appreciate that they're there end of things. So we talked about the organization end of things, clearances. You created your file. You've got the person, you created your file, you've got their clearances, you've got their emergency contact information, you've got their ways to communicate, and we'll chat more about these in just a moment. But again, cell phone, home phone, email, what have you. But we'll chat about emergency contacts in just a second here. And I'm going to, there we go, get all this put together. So we know we want them to appreciate being there. And we'll chat more about what those benefits might look like in the engagement part. We're still getting them we'll chat about in terms of keeping them, more of those benefits. But the overwhelming part of this is, hi, we're doing, some of you might have, and I'll pick on National Road because they're the ones putting this together, a fairly large geographic area. So projects might be big projects, or they might be a group of volunteers along a 90-mile span. So what that might mean is, how do we organize this stuff? You now have a file folder. You've got an excited person who knows that they can benefit the organization, and the organization can benefit, make them feel fulfilled. And you now have a handy-dandy file folder that says, hi, I have no record, or if I do have a record, this is what it is, and this is how you get a hold of me. And you have a large number of these, hopefully, if you're looking for them. And now what do we do? How do we know? How do we, remember that communication? How do we make sure that we haven't gotten ourselves overwhelmed to the point where we don't follow through, and now we have a large folder of papers that need shredded because these people aren't calling us back? There are many examples of volunteer management software, and I mentioned Bugle on here for no other reason than, please note, there's no sponsor to this on that end of things or whatnot. This is the one the Historical Society uses, and it's because I think it's like $50 per year total. But you need some kind of, it could be an Excel sheet, but it's, their name, their address, their phone number, their email, their preferred means of communication. Did we get their clearances? Did they get processed? And how often are they volunteering? Did they volunteer? When did they sign up for? What are they doing? When's the last time that anyone sent them an email or what have you? Were they reminded that, oh, you're volunteering at the local county fair at our booth? Did you remind them ahead of time that they just, I know you signed up a month ago when we passed out the calendar. It's 2 days from now. Just remember, be there at 9 a.m. Then again afterwards, thank you for going and doing that. And it doesn't have to be, if you have someone who wants to write thank you cards, that's fantastic. But it could be an email. It could be a text message. It could be a thanking them in person. It's just, for a situation like this, it just has to be, we came, we saw, we showed up, we helped, and they appreciated it. So when I mentioned Bugle, for example, it's basically, it's a database that you can then also email and text volunteers through, and you can set up shifts in there. And they have a free version. I think to get the database portion of it, you have to carry volunteers over from one event to the next and so forth, or to reach out through the database, you have to do the $50 a year version. But the free version is a place where you can have people click register, pick a shift, and put all of that information in there. You can even put in things like what they should wear that day. So if they're helping, let's say, do registration at your fundraising gala, they know that blue jeans are not an option. They know, or if they're helping clean a cemetery, they know it's supposed to be 90 degrees. They know there may be poison ivy. You should wear jeans, but it's short sleeve shirts, what have you. Where they're going to be outside, bring sunscreen, those kind of things. But again, all of that communication. The biggest problem, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the biggest problem with keeping and utilizing volunteers is communication. And if you don't have the ability to stay on top of it, don't try to get bigger than you have the capacity to do with that. If you can't get the thank yous out there, if you can't get the scheduling out there, you don't have a list of 75 people to go, I have a list of 75 people, 40 of them are never going to volunteer because it's been a year and you've never even reached out to go, thank you for signing up. They've found somewhere else to volunteer at this point. Usually there's a moment where they go, and maybe it's they retired, maybe it's their kids went off to college, maybe it's they stumbled across, they were on a tour at your facility and they were so impressed, I want to be a part of this. And it's really, it's that communication is within a few weeks of that moment. Because otherwise they might have another moment, and it might be that they're volunteering at another nonprofit instead of yours as a result. All right, so we've got them. Now let's keep them. The biggest thing to mention around on this whole front, and everything that we'll mention from here, is happy volunteers don't leave. Occasionally, will they move away? Will there be a health issue? Sure. But overall, provided there's no extenuating life circumstance, happy volunteers will stick around. So how do we engage these people? Because it's also easier to have a 10-year volunteer who gets it. They come in on Saturdays. Maybe they're going to be the front desk person at your archival facility. And they get it. They know, I need to come in, I need to make sure the pencils are sharpened, the lights are turned on, the heat's turned up 10 minutes or a half an hour or whatever before we open. We put the open flag out at 9 o'clock, we this, we that. At the end, this is how we use the microfilm reader or the machine or the computer and get logged into whatever software. It's easier to keep that person than to find a new person to fill that spot. So it's always, in terms of cost of getting or keeping, cost for keeping is always going to be lower. And I say cost, it might be cost in time, cost in effort, cost in energy, because there's a lot of institutional knowledge that you've instilled that you want to maintain rather than starting from scratch. So let's think of ways to engage those people. And again, if you do this, then we'll do that for you. If you as the volunteer do this for us, we'll do this for you. And it might not be that volunteering is we're talking in time and you're paying for time. When I say you're paying for time, I don't mean it to sound so transactional, but when you're paying for time, that fulfillment, that sense of accomplishment is in some cases the payment for that time. So how do we do that? Communication again. Maybe you have a newsletter. Or you thank them on social media. How are we reaching out to show we appreciate what you're doing? They might not have asked for that, but it's one of those things where never being thanked can build a smidge of resentment. You're never going to offend someone by appreciating them too much. Provided you're not weird and smothering. But you're never going to offend someone by saying thank you. So there are some other ways to get and keep volunteers on those benefits. Are there things they can get that others don't? They might be volunteering just because they want to give back. They might be volunteering because they've always wanted to see what the attic of the museum looks like, and if I help with this stuff, I'm going to get to see that behind the scenes, or I'm going to get to do this, I'm going to get to do that. So how else are they feeling fulfilled? Benefits, soft benefits, that's the fulfilling benefits. So again, in the remembering where people are at and remembering what they're good at, remembering what they want, they don't want their time wasted. Volunteers can be absolutely miserable at a committee meeting or excited on a work day. You don't necessarily need all of these people to come and sit about meetings to have meetings to have meetings. Some people are fine with that, and that's their personality, and that's their interest, and they're good with that, and that's perfect. And in some cases, we're going to go clean up a cemetery today, and we need your help. Bring a rake. And that person is going to be far happier than they're going to be on a 4-hour committee meeting. They feel connected to the greater good. That's a soft benefit. And they also feel like they're part of a group. This might be, volunteering for some might be a social situation. I've just moved here, and I know no one. And I could join a couple of clubs. I could go to a restaurant and hope that I run into people to visit with. I could sign up to work at a historical society and meet the people and meet some new friends along the way while giving back. So keep those things in mind. Those are benefits. Those are, if we're looking at this as a transactional situation, those are payment for services. Those are ways that you can make others want to come back and be repeat volunteers, repeat customers at the mission that is the organization. Hard benefits. Again, it's if you've got things happening, you want people to help, you are in some way paying for their time. Never underestimate the power of food, and interactive food at that. If you're going to have someone there for 3 hours and it starts at 7 a.m. or 10 a.m., bring coffee, or offer it, or juice, or what have you. If you're going to have a work day, see if you can find a volunteer. Hot dogs are not that expensive. See if you could order pizzas, sure, and that's fantastic. Or make it fun. See if you can find a volunteer to bring their grill, And like we've done this at the Historical Society, we've cleaning up the grounds around the museum. Is we brought the grill, brought the hot dogs, brought the chips and whatnot, and before you know it, you've got a cookout where that interactive and that networking is there, and those people are coming back because it was an experience, not just labor. For many organizations, there is no cost on our end to give away a membership, and some of those have benefits. For example, ours has a benefit that you can get into about 1,500 museums nationwide free of charge if you're a member of the Historical Society. If you have some of those benefits, consider, you know what, you volunteered 10 hours this year. Or write in your literature, if you volunteered this many hours, we'll provide this membership, which has this benefits. Never underestimate also that feeling of belonging. Shirts, hats, what have you, with your logo, a volunteer badge that might be very inexpensive to create, but has their name on it and mentions volunteer. It shows you appreciate them enough you've invested in them, they're going to offer to invest more in themselves for you. Those are just ways that you can, once you've gotten those people involved, ways you can keep them. And ways not just keep them, but you may find that some of them are as beneficial as some of your staff. Not saying that you want to tell your staff that, but I'm saying a 20-plus year volunteer that knows how to get things done for you is invaluable. So that all said, that's the basics behind sort of creating and engaging a volunteer base. And I mean, I can take any questions, but we appreciate the opportunity to chat with everybody today.
Thanks, Josh. Really appreciate this overview. Like you said, some of these things that you've mentioned seem like they should be common sense, but sometimes we need to be reminded of these things in order to make something like this successful.
Absolutely. It's one of those where it's very easy to accidentally take someone for granted. And I hate to drill into common sense stuff, but it's one of those where unless you put it down on paper and you think about it consciously as you're putting together a program, it won't be the first thing on your mind, and then it's easy to make a mistake. And a mistake means you lost somebody.
And also, I think, right, especially, I was just going to say, putting stuff down on paper, you may not think that person A needs that, but when person A isn't available and you have to substitute person B, they're going to need that. And if you already have that, you don't have to spend that, like you said, the night before creating it. It's there.
Yep.
Just a couple quick questions. One regarding clearances. I don't know what it costs now, but I know that there's typically a cost to have those done. What are your thoughts on the nonprofit picking up those costs, or like a portion of the costs?
They're using Pennsylvania as the guide. There are the three types of clearances. The state police clearance, I think the cost is waived if you're doing so as a volunteer. If you're doing so as an employee for an organization, there's a $10 or $15 cost. But as a volunteer, that one is waived. The PA child abuse one is, again, another $10 or $15. The FBI one can be $40 plus, $40, $50, and that end of things. We look at it here as we're the ones asking you to do it. We're asking you for the favor. So right off the bat, we do the cost for those initially. There is I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. If that person, we do a certain amount of feeling out, is that person serious about being a regular volunteer? It might be a situation where if they're not working around children and they're coming once to a one-day park cleanup kind of thing, that is, I mean, it may not be necessary, and again, check the rules in your jurisdiction, it may not be necessary to have all of those done for a big community-wide thing. But if you're going to put that person in as a tour guide, let's say at a museum, or helping with a summer camp, or even behind the front desk at your research facility where a group of people might come in, and they might have children, and mom and dad might need to use the restroom at any point, which might mean, and we all have been in places where you think, hey, they're going to be with their kid at all times. That doesn't always happen. Suddenly you find yourself standing next to two 8-year-olds in the middle of a museum because dad needed the restroom and just assumed, well, the nice tour guide over here. But that's just it. The dad assumed the nice tour guide over here is safe. So we have to fulfill our part of that. And if we're asking a volunteer to be there, that's sort of investment number one. So this is a very much, if you it's your more specialized volunteers and your volunteers that are going to be working around children. If you want those people to be there to do you a favor, those are some costs that you will have to bear on that end of things. I know that there are organizations. I mean, my daughter's school. If you're going to, I mean, they have the ability to go, hey, you can't come on the field trip without. But if you want to volunteer at the school, you provide your own clearances. You fill them out. You pay for them. We're not asking people to volunteer to hang out with their children. We're asking them to do stuff for us. So as a result, there's not a giant benefit for them to fill those clearances out and pay for them themselves to do us favors. So it really should fall on the organization.
On that, I would assume if you have like a teacher who wants to volunteer, they should have all the clearances already,
Yes,
correct? And then they can just transfer that over, show that they fit that.
They can, yes. They can provide you copies, and those clearances have expiration dates. But and so mostly, so you don't get one done 20 years ago and then went out and robbed a bank last week. But that said, they're depending on the clearance, a 3 to 5 year period. So it's not even an annual situation. It's you're providing you're covering these clearances to last a length of time. And if they do, even if they volunteer for another organization, they could bring you copies of those clearances that they've already done. So it doesn't have to be a new set. It just has to be a set that is not expired.
So I think that's another thing, that tracking your volunteers, you really need to keep on top of their clearances and when they expire. They can see that could be very easy. Like, oh, we got their clearances. And then you don't think about it again. But lo and behold, 3-5 years later, whatever that time frame is, oh, we need to do those again.
And we have, I mean, here as an organization, we have groups of people who, I mean, in blunt honesty, we have individuals here who came here doing community service, while largely due to some kind of legal issue. They're not the ones working with children. They might be the ones helping in a swing a hammer at a volunteer project doing demo. So it's, again, that's not a no. Yes, that is there takes a certain amount of you're back to your spreadsheet, you're back to your or your low cost, no cost volunteer management software, somewhere where there's a checkbox that did they fill out a clearance? Yes. Did it come back? Yes. Is there an issue? Yes, which means those are the ones that are highlighted that they can help with these kind of projects. And everyone, I mean, people deserve second chance. So they can help with these kind of projects. But the summer camp over here, we need to make sure that they're on the short list of these individuals, because that's where there is an assumption. We are nonprofits largely in a history, heritage, arts, culture, preservation background. There's an assumption that when your children, I mean, you put a poster out, you put for example, let's say a summer camp, those parents have an assumption that you are keeping their children safe. And guess what? That assumption is not just an assumption. That is a legal assumption that if we are taking their children on for any length of time, that we are keeping them safe. So that's where that, and I'm not trying to emphasize that to scare people. I'm trying to emphasize that as that simple record keeping, staying on top of those and making sure when is that clearance need renewed, put the date or the year right in that spreadsheet. So then once a year, you can go through and go, oops, search for 2026, it's coming up, and email those 5 people going, hey, I need you to fill out this form. And you can do them in batches like that. But stay on it in an easy way rather than panicking when you realize, oh, hey, wait a minute, the person running our kids' camp hasn't had their clearances renewed in 10 years.
Right. And I think back to your point early on of the organization is investing time in this, and something like tracking clearances and paying for clearances may seem like, oh, this is such a heavy burden to take on, but think about what you're potentially getting in return.
Absolutely. You spent $50 on someone to get thousands of dollars worth of free help, and free help with a specific set of skills.
Knowing that the volunteer rate is close to, if not already, $30 an hour in Pennsylvania. Like, that's what one volunteer hour equates to. 2-3 hours in, they've paid for themselves.
Yeah, the first day they paid for themselves. And again, if you have 75 people volunteering to help clean up a cemetery, it may not be that you need to go into that. You're not going to spend 20 hours working on putting together files on 75 people to do one park cleanup or one cemetery cleanup. Anyone who's coming in to work with those kind of programs that involve children, that's where we need to make sure we go above and beyond, because we're responsible for safety when that occurs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to be everyone at all times. You don't have to make it feel. You don't have to feel overwhelmed. Like, oh, we have this huge list. Not really, because a good chunk of that list is never going to work with around a child, depending on what kind of a nonprofit you are and what kind of programming you
have. Also, mentioning tracking volunteer time. Can you just give an example or some sort of anecdote of how you've used or know of how organizations have used volunteer time for like grant matches or getting additional funding? Or
you mentioned the $30 an hour volunteer rate. That can be used in a multitude of ways. One is, like you said, applying for grants. There are, on a simple grant form, it's quite often asking how many active volunteers you have. On a complex grant form, it may ask how many hours those volunteers have spent in the last year. And that is more of an operating support, capacity building, programmatic grant application. Let's say now on the other end of that, you have volunteers helping with a project and you have a project-based grant application. We're applying for money for restoration of this property. You may, for educators to teach classes on historic preservation or architecture or what have you, whatever it might be. Those are situations where you can use that hourly rate as in some cases, and double check application by application, as the match. You can apply for, let's say you can apply for, I'm making up a fake grant here, between $5,000 and $10,000, and you have to have a 50% match, and they will take in kind as part of the match. You can say, these instructors will each be volunteering their time for 10 hours each. Those 10 hours times 30, that's $300 per person. You might have had $5,000 for your program that you had hoped you were going to have 7.5 or 10 for. You can apply for a higher amount, or you can work it right into your budget calculations by using that match volunteer hour basis. So it comes in very handy. And that, again, is a situation where that's going to be on specific programs for the most part. So you might have to do some better record keeping overall than you would on the get 50 people together to clean up a park kind of situation. It might be a situation that, hey, we have a timesheet at this program on the counter next to the coffee and donuts that you signed in and you signed out, and how many hours you were there, and then those are compiled, and you can now see as you've gone through that grant process and you've reported on that grant that you were able to take those timesheets and tally them up to see how many volunteer hours you had on that project to fulfill for your grant agency.
Great. I think the overall takeaway from this is, yes, you have to put a little bit of work into this, but the takeaway from doing it is beneficial in so many different aspects of that it's worth investing that time, your staff time, to make this happen.
For example, you could pay a contractor with historic preservation background to do several $1,000s to do this project, or you could, with the right excitement build up, finding the right person. It's not going to happen all the time, but with the right person, you might find a recently retired contractor who was very used to working in old houses who just donated $5,000 worth of labor because he couldn't sit still or she couldn't sit still at home. And you and I have talked about this privately. I mean, with someone we know who writes grants and so forth, that is now, she retired and she's as busy as she was when she was working because people who can't sit still. So use that skill,
Right.
because what you've found is you might have paid $120 an hour, $200 an hour. I mean, for whatever the skill set is, in a paid capacity, or you might have found someone that you spent $40 to $60 on total, plus some lunches, to get some clearances for someone who's now spending some hours at your organization that are worth thousands.
Right. And I wholeheartedly second the make sure you have coffee available.
Absolutely.
If your organization does not have a coffee pot in your kitchen or in your workroom or break room, make sure you invest in one, because coffee goes so far, so very far. And
Some
also,
bottled
a
water
dozen
and some
donuts on your
donuts.
way
I
in.
mean, quite honestly, the
Yeah.
fact that it's back to that same feeling fulfilled. The fact that it was obvious that you cared enough that those people were coming to help you. They weren't an afterthought. And while on one hand it's very convenient and very helpful, and who doesn't like caffeine, on the other hand, that you've done a lot right there on minute one to make someone feel like we prepared for your arrival, even if it is just help yourself to the kitchenette. So it's just little things that you can do to get, again, as a nonprofit, the need for labor that we can't afford on a nonprofit budget is great. And it's a little work to coordinate, but once they're coordinated, it's the amount of things that you can get done with volunteer support is fantastic. So you've got to put a little bit into it to get there, but it's well worth it.
Well, Josh, again, thank you very much for providing all this information. I think it'll go very far for a lot of organizations. And if organizations have questions, Josh has his email in the slides. You can also feel free to contact the National Road, and we can help you answer some of those questions as well. So again, thank you, and everyone have a good day.